Thank you.
All right, thanks, John, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me here. This is very exciting for me. As John said, I do these types of trainings a lot in schools and school districts. I don't do them as often for corporations, for people working in the corporate sector. So I'm excited to share this with you all, and I'm also excited to learn from you and to hear back from you if you try any of these strategies that we're going to talk about today. So this is an introduction to mindful communication. I'm really going to focus on 2 mindful listening strategies. And those are the strategies that I hope you take away. I hope you have a chance to practice, to try out. I'm going to talk about them again in both a personal context, what these might look like in your personal lives, as well as a professional context. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, that I may be switching between those 2 contexts in the application. The plan is I'm going to start with a mindfulness activity. We're going to do some mindfulness of breath together. I'm going to facilitate a circle activity to debrief that activity. Then I'm going to share the presentation where I'm going to introduce the 2 techniques, and I'm going to also leave some space in there for some practice. We're going to do some demos, some practice activities. And finally, time permitting, I'm going to share with you all an overview of the research on the benefits of mindfulness overall. So before we get into the mindfulness practice I'm going to invite you all to do with me, I wanted to share this quote from a philosopher, Krishnamurti. He said, "The highest form of human intelligence is to observe yourself without judgment." Now, this is really interesting to me to think about this as a kind of intelligence, because the way we define mindfulness is mindfulness means paying attention to present moment experience in a non-judgmental way. So when you learn to withhold judgment as you pay attention to the present moment, that's how you practice mindfulness in a nutshell. And this is interesting to have a philosopher suggesting this is one of the highest or the highest forms of intelligence. Now, this has implications for the challenges that may arise while we're practicing mindfulness. So for example, I'm going to invite you to do some mindfulness of breath with me. What do you do if you keep getting distracted, right? If you find no matter how much you bring your attention back to your breath, you keep having your mind wander off into thought. Well, to practice mindfulness non-judgmentally, you don't judge your experience of being distracted or your mind wandering as right or wrong. You don't judge that as good or bad. You can simply notice that that's what's present for you in your practice at this time. And just make the decision to bring your attention back to your anchor, to bring your awareness back to your breath. And when you do that, that act of noticing that your mind has wandered and then returning your attention back to your breath or your anchor, whatever it may be, is like a bicep curl for your brain. It's training and strengthening your capacity for mindful awareness. Now, some folks, when they're new to this and they find it very challenging, they may ask me, what if I find myself needing to return my attention to my breath over and over, or I find my mind is just so busy, so overactive, I find I just can't do it. Well, again, you can be present with that. You can bring awareness to that. Just notice it in a non-judgmental way. It's not right or wrong or good or bad for your mind to be busy. You bring awareness to that in a non-judgmental way. And that just means that the exercise that you're giving your brain, that you're giving your capacity for mindful awareness, is involving an even heavier lift and an even greater benefit. One suggestion to try when this happens for you is to use what we call O statements. So if you're focusing your awareness on your breath in a mindfulness activity and you notice that you're distracted by thoughts, you can just say to yourself, "Oh, that's thinking." Or, "Oh, I noticed that I'm having thoughts right now." Oren J. Sofer is a mindfulness teacher who says that's like programming an internal mindfulness bell, because the O statement reminds you to return your awareness to your anchor. It reminds you that you're in this practice of non-judgmental present moment awareness. You could apply O statements to other things too. Like you can make it more specific. "Oh, I notice I'm having thoughts about this new project I'm working on. I notice that those thoughts are present with me." And then again, you choose to gently return your awareness to your breath. Other kinds of distractions. "Oh, I notice I'm occasionally distracted by back pain. Oh, I notice I'm judging this experience. I notice I'm wondering how long this is going to take, or I'm thinking that this is silly. Why are we doing this?" Right? Those are all kinds of distractions or thoughts that can come up. You can just say, "Oh," Just notice it and return your awareness to your breath. So I'm going to invite you all to practice with me now. We'll do some simple mindfulness of breath. We can begin by getting into a comfortable posture, maybe sitting with your feet flat on the floor, sitting in an upright posture, maybe placing your hands palms down on your legs or thighs, and just closing down your eyes, or if it's more comfortable for you, just resting your gaze at a neutral space in front of you. And then just bringing awareness to your breath. No need to change your breath in any way. Just notice how your body goes on breathing all by itself. Sometimes in a practice like this, we may say silently to ourselves, breathing in, I am aware that this is my in-breath. Breathing out, I'm aware that this is my out-breath. Breathing in and out. Perhaps noticing the sensations of your breath through the way the air feels as it enters through your nostrils, flows through your sinuses and down into your lungs. Noticing the warmer breath as you exhale. Perhaps noticing the way the chest rises and falls with each breath. Or noticing any feelings of relaxation, feelings of tension that arise with each breath. And as you bring awareness to your breath, you may notice that your mind sometimes wanders. You may notice any judgments or evaluations that your mind may wish to create, any distractions that arise. When this happens, it's okay. Just notice that your mind has wandered, perhaps giving yourself a moment to register where the mind has wandered to. And then gently returning your awareness back to your breath. Just letting awareness ride the wave of your breath as you breathe in, and breathe out. If it's comfortable for you, you may choose to slow down your breath. You can do this by allowing your next in-breath to be a little bit deeper and your next out-breath a little bit slower, settling into a calming, slower breath. Breathing in, I'm aware that my in-breath has become deeper. Breathing out, I'm aware that my out-breath has become slower. Deeper, slower. And if you feel present, maybe offering a half smile on the out-breath. Smiling because you feel present. Now perhaps taking your right hand and placing it over your heart, and then placing your left hand over your right hand. Just breathing deep into your whole body. Noticing the rise and fall of your chest. And if it's comfortable for you, saying these words silently to yourself as a way to just offer yourself kindness, sending compassion to yourself. I am strong. I am beautiful. I am loving and I am loved. Just repeating those words to yourself, meditating on their meaning. And giving yourself compassion. Finally, maybe just sitting in open awareness, noticing anything that arises for you now. Noticing any thoughts, any feelings. Just resting in open, kind awareness. As we move toward concluding this exercise, maybe just bringing some movement back into the body. This could be wiggling the fingers and the toes, maybe moving the arms and legs a bit. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. Thanks everyone for sitting with me, for practicing with me. I'd like you to take just a minute or two now, just to reflect on that experience. What did you notice? What came up for you? What was that like for you? Just reflect on what that experience was like for you. So I would like to lead a circle, facilitate a circle to debrief that activity. A lot of the learning that comes from mindfulness comes from talking about it with others who are practicing with you. So I'm going to ask for 3 to 5 participants to be in the inner circle of a fishbowl. And the question we're going to talk about is simply what did you notice or what came up for you during that exercise? And it can be anything. It could be sensations of your breath or sensations in your body, thoughts, distractions, feelings, really anything. When we do a circle practice like this, these are the norms I'd like you to follow. We're going to use a talking piece. So that means wait your turn to speak and say just enough. Say just enough means speak your piece, but make sure you're mindful of the time that we need to leave for everyone else to speak. When you don't have the talking piece, be a good listener. Meditate on the story that your colleagues are sharing. And it's always okay to pass if you have nothing else new to add or you're not comfortable sharing. It's fine to just pass. You can pass just by passing the talking stick to the next person. To adapt a fishbowl circle to Zoom, you know, in a fishbowl, typically we would use this if we want to facilitate engagement and dialogue among a group and there's just too many participants to have everyone in the inner circle. So you have the inner circle would hold the discussion, the outer circle would observe and then maybe comment on the discussion at another point. To adapt this to Zoom, the inner circle is going to use the video conference feature of Zoom to discuss. And the outer circle, if you're in the outer circle, you can use the chat box feature of Zoom to comment on what's happening in the inner circle or respond to the prompt. So I'm going to ask now for 3 to 5 volunteers to be in the inner circle for this debrief activity. You can go ahead and raise your hand virtually using the Manage Participants box. There's a raise hand button, and I'll know that you're volunteering to be in the inner circle. Is that Reshmi or Raishmi?
It's Rashmi.
Reshmi, thank you. And Steve, I got you, thank you. David and Link. All right, so if you look in the chat box, I put up a speaker order. The speaker order is important because to adapt the talking piece to Zoom, because we can't physically pass a talking piece, I'm going to ask you to just say the name of the next person on the list. And that's how we signify that you've passed the talking piece. And the question is, what did you notice or what came up for you in that exercise? So for me, I noticed that when I start to bring my awareness to my breath, I noticed that my breathing is sometimes like shallow in a way. I was noticing that. And then when I bring awareness to it, I noticed that my belly and my diaphragm kind of drop out and I start breathing deeper. I also noticed in that exercise that when I was distracted by thoughts, distracting me away from focusing on my breath, the thoughts were usually about like the timing of the narration as I was facilitating, like how long do I wait before I say the next part of facilitating this exercise, or what am I going to even say next, because I wasn't using a script. So I was distracted by the thoughts of, you know, planning the parts of the facilitation. Reshmi.
Sure. So the first thing I noticed was my inhale was shallower than my exhale. So I worked to fix that throughout the exercise. And I was distracted a lot by the next to-dos and just the day-to-day. So I had to work to say, oh, and just bring myself back. Steve.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, I like you and Jordan, I noticed that my breath was very shallow when we started. It got deeper as I focused on it, but thoughts kept coming back into my head. and I'd find myself just my brain churning on all kinds of things, and then would try to do the O and go back to focusing on my breathing, and that seemed to help. This was a hard time of day. I've done some mindfulness, some of the other mindfulness sessions that we do at like 9:30 in the morning my time. It was much easier at the other time of day to clear my head than it is right now. David.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, similar thoughts. I noticed that my breath was faster than I thought, if that makes sense. I was trying to slow it down. I felt that I had, I had to stop distracting thoughts coming in. Mine seemed like it was racing a little bit in various places and trying to really focus on the breathing and the practice there. But speaking, I very much like the practice. I can see myself doing more of that. Just figuring out another way to try to halt the distracting thoughts or push them aside would be great. So, Link.
Excellent. So, besides noticing my breath, the biggest thing that kind of came to me during it was the fact that I think this is the first time I've slowed down in a month. It's, it isn't what's the next task or anything. It was nice to just be into the nothing is happening moment. So that was the kind of real thing that hit me was, I don't do this. I probably should. And just how easy it was to get into a relaxed state. So that's kind of really what I got out of it. Jordan?
Thanks, everyone. Because a circle using a talking piece doesn't allow folks to respond to one another and talk across the circle, I'm going to pass the talking piece one more time for that purpose, to allow anyone who'd like to respond to your colleague or to make connections with each other. And I want to remind you all, if you're not in the inner circle, technically that means you're in the outer circle. You may use the chat box to share or respond there. So connections and responses. I wanted to respond with everybody. I think Reshmi, Steve, David talked about, in particular, noticing the way your breath is. Maybe it was shallow and then it got more relaxed or got deeper. I wanted to connect with that because one thing I noticed when I practice mindfulness is I notice I carry tension, not just in like how I breathe, but I notice if I carry tension in my shoulders or my neck, sometimes that will relax, and then I'll notice I carry tension in my jaw. So just practicing mindfulness helps me to be aware of all these places in my body where I'm carrying tension. And then you do some simple mindfulness, and I usually feel the tension just be released, which is nice. Reshmi.
Sure. As I listened to everyone, one thought that came to me was just 5 minutes a day, right? Just taking that time for myself. And I used to do that. I don't do that post-COVID anymore. So just as I listened to everyone, I was just thinking of maybe we should have a plan for each day to kind of do this, right? And just fit it into our daily lives. It's hard. Let me see Steve.
Pass. David.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it that you mentioned that. And I like what Link said about how easy it was to get into that and how it was, he hadn't slowed down in a month, and I can appreciate that. So being able to take care of all that. So thank you for bringing that. I also noticed that I turned my camera off because I didn't want to be, I don't know, I felt it kind of, I don't know if people were watching, I don't know if everyone was actually participating, so I didn't want to, I don't know, I felt that was kind of fun also to see if everyone else would have their eyes closed, but I didn't want to open my eyes to be the one guy that had his eyes open, so that was a thing for me as well, so I was worrying about that in my mind as well. That's all, so back to Link.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. The temptation to open your eyes and see who's watching you is something that I had to actively fight as well. So, Jordan?
All right, thank you everyone for sharing. I'm gonna get into this presentation now. So if you were to ask me, Jordan, can you sum up what you mean by mindful communication in one principle? Could you boil this all down to one maxim? For me, it would be this: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Some of you may be familiar with this language. This is actually habit number 5 in Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey believed that if you want to be highly effective and highly successful in both your personal life and your professional life, you need to build the habit of seeking to understand others before you yourself seek to be understood. Now, this is easy enough to understand in principle, but it's really hard to practice. And one of the reasons why is because we all share the universal human need of being understood. We all have a need to be understood. We all have a need to be heard. And when we act on that need, we forget to practice this principle. So we need to practice listening in our relationships, both personal and professional. We also need to practice listening to ourselves by training our capacity for mindfulness and using what I call inner awareness, right? Being mindful of what is alive in you, what's present in you. That's part of mindful communication as well. And finally, we need to practice the strategies and the vocabulary for responding to others with empathy, because listening is not just about what we do with our ears. It's also how we use language to respond when we're listening. That's a part of the skills that we're going to practice today in mindful listening. So this is Marshall Rosenberg. He is the founder of the school of thought, or the area of practice called nonviolent communication. And I draw on his work when I talk about mindful listening. Marshall Rosenberg has a really brilliant way of teaching this stuff that he developed. He basically used puppets. And one puppet is the jackal puppet you see on the left. The jackal he would use to show examples of how we tend to be socialized to use language, how we learn to use language, most of us. And then he would use a giraffe puppet to be an example of the way that we're learning to use language when we talk about mindful listening or nonviolent communication or whatever schools we happen to be drawing on. So when he's talking about jackal language, right, or how we all tend to be socialized to use this language, what Marshall Rosenberg meant by that is that our vocabulary for judgment, for criticism, for blame is very developed, and for most of us, it tends to be our default setting. Jackals also tend to use the language of generalization a lot, like things like, you never help around the house, or, oh, I always mess this part up. Jackals are also likely to be inexperienced at using the language of feelings and needs, and that language is at the core of mindful listening. These characteristics of jackal language are problematic because they mean that we are more likely to end up in conflict and interactions that are rife with tension than we are to achieve authentic connection, real communication, and to be able to help each other to have our needs met. The giraffe, on the other hand, symbolizes the skills of mindful listening or the vocabulary of mindful listening. So these are the most foundational mindful listening skills that you can practice. The first is mimicking or paraphrasing. Mimicking means you just parrot back what the person said to you. Paraphrasing means that you do that, but you put it into your own words. Now, you may think that this is, time consuming, a waste of time to always be repeating what others are saying in communication, but it turns out that it's very, very powerful. Mimicking is used in hostage negotiations. They refer to it as mirroring. And paraphrasing has been shown in research to reduce the time it takes to get through like labor negotiations and other kinds of high tension communication scenarios. Another strategy is to reflect feeling. And when we're talking about reflecting feeling, it's important to keep in mind that when others are speaking to us, they often don't state what their feelings are. But usually we can intuit it. We can use our capacity for empathy. We can figure it out and we can reflect it back. Oh, it sounds like you're feeling such and such. Is that the case? Another strategy is to paraphrase and reflect feeling, just combining those two. Stephen Covey talked about a silent empathic response, what we call bearing witness, right? Because sometimes just being present for another person provides empathy. You don't even have to speak if the connection is there and you're present. And then the classic Marshall Rosenberg strategy in nonviolent communication is to reflect feelings and needs. Again, you're speaking to someone and in what they shared, they didn't explicitly state what their feelings and needs are, But if you can figure it out and reflect that back, that's a powerful way to show you're listening and to provide the person with empathy. So the structure, just to put this into a sentence starter, is, are you feeling blank because you need blank, right? So imagine my wife says to me, you know, I went to Starbucks because I wanted to get some studying done, and there was all these teenagers talking there. She didn't tell me anything about what she's feeling or what she's needing. But to provide empathy in how I listen, I may say, sounds like you're feeling frustrated because you just need some peace and quiet to do your work. Is that it? And if she says yes, and I guessed right, again, that's a powerful way to provide empathy and show you're listening. Marshall Rosenberg, as a side note, he referred to this way of using language as nonviolent communication because he was part of the peace movement in the 60s and 70s. And he believed that you could even help nations who were at conflict on the brink of war to reach compromise if we just learn to use this language of feelings and needs. It's the language of peace. In order to fill in that sentence starter, it's very important that you have on hand and practice the vocabulary of feelings and the vocabulary of needs. So I asked John to provide you with the CNVC, the Center for Nonviolent Communication, inventory for those two vocabularies. And this is important because we often describe our feelings using vocabulary of things that are not feelings, right? So if you ask someone, say, how do you feel right now? And they say, well, I feel so attacked. I feel like you're attacking me. Well, you're attacking me is not a feeling. It's something that someone else does to you. And in mindful listening, mindful communication, it's very important to use the vocabulary of feelings because they locate feelings as things that are inside of us, and that encourages us to take responsibility for our own feelings. And that's why this helps communication and relationships and connection and so forth. So we'll talk a little bit more about examples like that. For now, just keep in mind, the vocabulary is going to be useful. Marshall Rosenberg called this language giraffe language. He used the giraffe to symbolize this because giraffes have the largest heart of any land mammal. And ultimately, using this language is about compassion, right? It's about seeking to make life more wonderful for those in our lives who we care about, right? Whether it's in a personal or professional context. So I'm going to share a personal story to illustrate some of these techniques. I'm a big fan of a relatively new artist that came out, a musician by the name of Cavetown. And these are pictures from my Instagram account, if you want to follow me, of a Cavetown concert that I went to over a few months ago. This is actually a picture of me. I got to meet the artist backstage. I had VIP tickets. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm obsessed with this artist, Cavetown, these days. Now, I have an older brother, not John, but another older brother named Justin, who also loves music. And when we were young and we lived together at my parents' house, we played music together. We played in bands together and wrote songs together. We listened to a lot of the same artists. It was really cool that we had that, that connection back in the day. So when I got into Cavetown, I thought, my brother Justin would love Cavetown too. He would love this artist. This is the kind of music that Justin and I used to listen to. So I texted my brother. He lives on the East Coast. I lived on the West Coast. And I texted him, a Cavetown song. I said, hey, check this artist out. You might like it. He texted me back and said, I'm not interested. So I texted him a couple more songs. I texted him a YouTube video of Cavetown performing and check this stuff out. You might like this. And I get no response from those subsequent texts. Now you would think that I would get the hint, right? And stop sending him stuff about Cavetown, but what do? I continue texting Justin playlists that I made, YouTube videos, check out this album that he just released, and still I'm getting no replies from my brother Justin when I text him stuff about my favorite artist, Cavetown. Now what comes to mind when I'm experiencing this? If you would ask, what's Jordan feeling as he's experiencing this interaction? Well, Justin is just so closed-minded. Now that statement, is a Jackal statement, right? Because I'm expressing whatever my feelings are about this interaction through a judgment of my brother. So I can catch myself if I practice mindfulness and mindful communication. I can catch myself. I know that I'm using a jackal statement, and I can say, well, in this situation, oh, I can put on my giraffe ears, right? I can shift into a different way of listening to myself and others. I can shift into the language of mindful listening and mindful communication. This is another way we can program an internal mindfulness bell to catch those jackal statements when we're using them or others are using them, and then to shift into using giraffe ears. So to do this requires us to observe what's present in us. In this situation for me, what was present in me without judging it, right? Not judging my brother, but also not being judgmental about what's alive in me. And to do this, to listen to myself, the first thing I might try to do is to translate that jackal statement into an observation without judgment. Can I use language where I strip the judgment out? And when I try to do that, I might say to myself, well, actually, what I noticed is that I sent Justin several text messages about Cape Town, and he only responded to the first one, right? So I want to use that language rather than expressing myself through this judgmental language. The next thing I can do is I can get in touch with my feelings and needs. I ask myself, what am I actually feeling? What's alive in me? And what might the unmet need be? This is an act of mindfulness too, because I'm practicing inner awareness now. And if I do that, I find out, I actually feel frustrated. And maybe I feel a little sad because I just need connection. Because I just want connection with my sibling. Now, it's fascinating to me when I explore these examples in my personal life that I feel frustrated or sad because I need connection would manifest as, well, Justin is just so closed-minded. And it begs the question, why is it that we tend to express ourselves in that sort of language? I think it has something to do with that we're socialized in such a way where we avoid being vulnerable, right? We don't want to be vulnerable. And one of the ways that we do that is rather than getting in touch with our own feelings, we project them onto other people as judgment, as accusations, right? As assumptions we make about others' intentions, and so forth. But this is a powerful act of inner awareness to do this, and it's required in order to practice mindful communication. Just so you get a sense of the broader context of this story. This is a true story that I'm using to illustrate some of these examples. And I caught myself having that judgmental language, and instead of using that, I did speak to my brother Justin, and I said, I just feel frustrated. I feel upset because I think I just want the connection that we had when we were younger. And he heard me, he listened to me. And then a week or two later, he contacted me and he said, hey, Jordan, I really like when you shared books with me a couple months ago. Would you mind sharing some books with me that I could read? Because I want to do some reading. So because I told him what my need was, rather than expressing myself through judgment, he was able to make the decision, you know what? I actually care about my brother and I'd like to help him have that need met. So I'm going to ask him if he can share books with me. We can connect around that because I don't really care about Cape Town as much as Jordan wants to text me about it. So I want to flip this now into listening techniques because the example explores these techniques as how I could have spoke, right, in the first place. But I want you to think of this first more as a listening technique, as a way we respond when we're listening to provide the other person with empathy. So if I were relating this story to you, I was telling you this, I was texting my brother about Cape Town, he wasn't responding, and I just think he's just so closed-minded. You could respond to me by saying, well, what I'm hearing, Jordan, is that you're feeling frustrated because you just want connection with your family. Is that it? And then as a listener, you provide empathy. Now, in our culture, sometimes this word need can have negative connotations. If you're always talking about needs people have, it might cause them to feel weak. So you could change that word out when you're using this as a listening response for these underlying parts of these phrases here. You could change it to, for example, are you frustrated because it's important to you, Jordan, that you have connection with your family? Or are you feeling frustrated because you really want connection? Or are you feeling frustrated because you value relationships with your family? In all three of these examples, the underlying text is just used interchangeably with the word need. The other example, the other technique in the example of telling my brother about Cave Town is when you paraphrase what someone is saying to you, but you do it as an observation without a judgment. That is, you strip the judgment out as you reflect back the content to the other person. So if I were to tell you this, the story about my brother and say he's just so closed-minded, you can reflect back that content, but strip the judgment out. And here's another example of what that looks like as a listening strategy, as a way of empathically responding to another person. Imagine you leave this class today and one of your colleagues says, you know what, this presenter has a big mouth. It's like, ooh, that's Jackal language, right? Whatever they're experiencing, they're expressing it as a judgment or criticism of me. An empathic response would be, I also noticed that Jordan spoke for most of the workshop and only left 15 minutes at the end for discussion. Right? And notice the difference in the language, the Jackal language and the Giraffe language. This should make it evident the power of this way of using language in communication, whether for listening or for mindful speech. I want to share one more example. This is just like a hypothetical example to illustrate the techniques. Imagine a child speaking to his father. Dad, I've had it. I hate my teacher and school's a waste of my time. Now, in order to use mindful listening, to use these empathic responses, it's important to keep in mind we need to diagnose before we prescribe. We ask ourselves, what does this child need before I respond to them? And I make sure I respond with what they need. So this could mean, does this person want my advice? Do they want me to relate my own experiences to what they just shared? Or does this person just want empathy? Do they just want to be heard? Now, it turns out that in most cases, when people are speaking to us out of pain or suffering or discomfort, what they're really looking for is empathy. And even if they need advice or they want your advice, they're not likely to be able to truly hear it and receive it until they've received empathy. Stephen Covey and Marshall Rosenberg would both say that when a person needs empathy, they need it like someone who's suffocating needs air, right? That means if you give them anything else besides empathy, they're going to still feel like they're suffocating. They're going to still feel the pain that they're in. Maybe they'll feel worse. So empathy is something that sometimes people need in its own right, and sometimes folks need it as a foundation to making them ready to hear you if you offer advice or other kinds of support. So in that example, Dad, I've had it. School is for the birds. School's a waste of my time. If that child wants empathy, it's important to keep in mind that any one of these autobiographical responses will not provide the child with empathy. So here we're talking about advising, any way you give advice. Son, you just need to try harder. Did you check into the tutoring center? Interpreting, and this is because we tend to interpret through the lens of our own experiences. I felt the same way when I was your age. I remember thinking what a waste of time my classes were. Or evaluating. That's a highly respected school. You can't quit when you've come this far. So again, keep in mind, if the child or the other person needs empathy, anything else that you say in response is going to hurt their jackal ears, right? And empathy is what's going to move the communication forward. So here's examples of paraphrasing and reflecting feelings. Dad, I've had it. School is for the birds. You're really feeling frustrated about school. This is reflecting feelings because the parent reflected that the feeling was frustration, and it's paraphrasing because the parent said it's about school. That's just reflecting back the content. We usually, when you're doing reflecting, you usually would phrase it as a question because you don't know what they're feeling or what their need is or exactly what they're saying. You're asking it as a question because you want to know, right? You're checking to make sure you understand. Is this what it was? Was it that you're feeling frustrated about school? So that questioning tone is important as well in this. And here's how it would look if you're reflecting feelings and needs. Dad, I've had it. School's a waste of my time. School is for the birds. Sounds like you're feeling frustrated because you want your education to be more relevant. Is that right? So the feeling is there, frustrated, and the need, the father didn't use the word need in this case. He said because you want, but that's a change in for need, your education to be relevant. Is that right? Reflecting feelings and needs is the classic NVC empathic response in the work of Marshall Rosenberg. Very, very powerful communication strategy. So I'm gonna invite Jackal to come out so we can practice some of these techniques as a group. When we do these practice exercises, I want you to remember to avoid interpreting and avoid advising, right? These are autobiographical responses. They're not going to provide Jackal with empathy. And our goal here is to practice strategies that show we're listening, show we understand, and provide Jackal with empathy. So how about we try these three first? Paraphrasing. And if the Jackal statement has judgment mixed in, you can maybe try paraphrasing where you strip the judgment out and just phrase it as an observation without judgment. What I'm hearing you're saying is that reflecting feelings, just trying to figure out what the person is feeling and reflecting that back. It sounds like you're feeling blank. Is that it? And then the Rosenberg NVC strategy of reflecting feelings and needs. It sounds like you're feeling blank because you need blank, right? Or it sounds like you're feeling blank because you just really want blank, or it's really important to you that blank. If you want to change out that word need, use different phrases. All right. You all ready to meet Jackal? Should I bring Jackal out?
Yeah.
All right, let's get Jackal out here. Good afternoon, class.
Good afternoon.
I'm Jackal.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon.
Hello, I'm here. Good afternoon, Jordan. How might I want to respond to Jackal, given what he just shared with me in particular? Hello, good afternoon. I'm here. How might you respond to a Jackal like that? If you'd like to share, you can just say out loud, or you can put up your ideas in the chat box. Either way, I'll try to pay attention in the chat box too.
Let me try because there wasn't much context. So I'll try, Jordan. Hi, Jackal. I apologize for the delay in my response. I was on mute by accident and just wanted to say hi back. So how are you doing?
Okay. So you tried to assuage the way Jackal was feeling by letting him know that there was actually something that was getting in the way, right? The mute button.
Yes. I did not want to go straight in for it sounds like something might be troubling you. Would you like to discuss it? I wanted to kind of avert that for the moment and just kind of see if I could diffuse the situation.
Okay. So that could work, right? If you just let Jackal know that I was actually trying to, but there was something in the way.
Right. It was a bit of a validation play there. I was trying. Yeah.
All right. So that may work, but what if Jackal responds like this? Excuses.
Well, that's fair, Jackal. It sounds like something's troubling you. Would you like to discuss it?
What are you, my therapist now or something?
Not at all. It just sounds like there might be some frustration in your voice, and we'd like to diffuse that and help you feel better about yourself.
All right, so now you're getting into the feelings, and I heard you say frustration. So if you were going to move towards a strategy of reflecting feelings and needs, that might be your guess, okay? And I think that would probably be a good guess, right? Jackal may be feeling frustrated.
Right. Well, the short, abrupt nature of his responses, I wanted to go there first, but I don't always want to just kind of go straight to the problem. I want to give people a chance to kind of maybe find that calming center and be able to talk about it, and we can kind of find common ground and resolution perhaps.
All right, good. Suggestion I want to make now is, if your intention is communication, seeking understanding,
Right.
what Marshall Rosenberg taught, what folks who practice mindful listening also teach, is that the best entry point into that is these empathic responses, right? If that's truly what you're seeking, you're going to have to show Jackal that you're listening, that you understand. And the strategies we know that work for doing that usually are paraphrasing or moving into this technique of reflecting feelings and needs. All right. So if we were going to try to reflect feelings and needs, what would your response be?
It might sound a little awkward because I'll go, well, Jackal, I've heard you say, hello, hello, is anyone there? It sounds like you're upset. Would you like to discuss that perhaps? I don't know if there should be a little bit more there, but like for me, in a situation, whether it be professional or personal, I get touchy-feely with stuff like that. So I want to kind of be cognizant of the fact that that could perhaps even upset or escalate the situation, right?
All right, so it sounds like you're upset, right? Or it sounds like you're frustrated. That'd be the first technique, reflecting the feeling. Jackal didn't say what he's feeling, but you're right. That'd be a great guess to start reflecting feeling. Now, how about if we wanted to try the technique of reflecting feelings and needs? That would mean you not only have to take a guess at the feeling, but you want to take a guess at the need as well. Jackal.
Hello, Jackal. It's good to have you here.
I like that, Link.
I'm guessing at his need and just trying to provide it.
Well, I don't know if it's the right word, Jordan, but like it feels like validation, right? Is the thing like, hey, I'm here. I said hi, say it back. Like, but validation to me is more of an action word rather than a feeling word that we tend to interchange at times, right? Just trying to leverage some of the stuff that we've shared. I don't know if I'm off base or if I'm thinking about it the right way.
Yeah, I think validation could be a good guess for the unmet need too, right? If Jackal's feeling frustrated or upset, the next question is, what is that underlying need that's not being met? And can we reflect that back too? And I want to reiterate that in empathic responding, the best ways that we know for providing empathy are just to do this reflection, right? Reflect back the feeling and the unmet need, rather than jumping into, hey, you want to talk more about that? Because that can make people feel like they're being interviewed. Right now, I feel like I'm at my therapist office and they just
It's a good call out. Yeah.
Questions and stuff like that. It's the reflecting that provides empathy. And if Jackal is upset and frustrated, he's going to need empathy before he's really even willing to engage in that conversation, right? On a foundation of mutual trust. So maybe we might try to say, are you feeling upset because you just really want validation, right? You look at that CNVC inventory of needs. Are there any other needs that might apply in this case?
You need help with something. So Jackal, it sounds like you're frustrated because you need help with something. Is that true?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Maybe are you frustrated because you need help, you need support, right? Those are universal human needs. You can pull that out. Any other guesses or thoughts about what the unmet need might be?
Just to be heard or acknowledged. Just is there something that's maybe it's not something on your mind? Do you want to get something off your chest? Is there something you want to talk about? Just in those lines.
To be acknowledged, right? If Jackal is upset, it has something to do with, you didn't say good morning to me. You never say good morning to me anymore. Maybe Jackal's upset or frustrated because he just wants to be acknowledged, right? Those are all great guesses. I want to show you different ways that this situation could play out. So imagine I got my Jackal ears on, right? So I'm going to use Jackal language too. And if I were to address this with Jackal, Jackal says, good afternoon. You never say good afternoon to me anymore. I said, well, good morning, Jackal. Ah, finally, you never say good morning. I'm pretty sure I said good morning to you yesterday. And if I remember correctly, I said good morning to you at least once over the weekend. Only because I said something, you never acknowledged me because you thought of it. Jackal, I don't think that's fair. That's not a fair accusation, all right? Oh, you don't understand, all right? If Jackal needs empathy, anything else that I provide is going to hurt his jackal ears. If I were to listen in a different way, what Jackal's sharing with me is an accusation, right? It's judgment. But in mindful listening, we don't listen for the judgment. We don't listen for the accusations. We listen for feelings and needs, and we reflect that back, and it becomes a powerful way to provide empathy. So good morning. Never say good morning to me anymore. Good morning, Jackal. Ah, finally. You never do that. Jackal, are you feeling frustrated because you just need to be acknowledged? Yes, and we barely spend time together anymore. You used to make me breakfast. Sounds like you're also feeling upset because you just want some more quality time with me. Is that it? Yeah. So if somebody is feeling upset, frustrated, they're suffering, they're in pain, they don't want to have their feelings litigated. They don't want you to rush to suggest how you can solve their problem, make them feel better. What they often need is just that empathy, right? That's a universal human need. We all have it. So you can see by shifting in that example, by shifting into giraffe language, listening in a different way, we can get an entirely different result from the conversation. Let's do another example. How about, let me see here. I'll do like a work example. You know how I feel about working on this new prospect with my team? I feel like I have to do all the work myself. I feel like I have to do everything myself. What might Jackal be feeling, and what might the unmet need be? Right? Those are the first questions, and then we could try to put that into an empathic response.
Feeling.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say Jackal might be feeling overwhelmed and probably needs support and feels like he doesn't have that support.
All right, you want to try responding that with putting that into a response for Jackal? You want to give it a try?
Sure. Hi, Jackal.
Hi. You know how I feel about working on this new prospect with my team? I feel like I have to do all the work myself.
Hi, Jackal. I feel like, Hi, Jackal. It seems like you are currently overwhelmed. Is that how you're feeling right now?
Yeah.
That's great to know. Is there anything I can do to help? I don't know if this is the way to go. I'm just like.
Well, you got the first part, right? You reflected
Okay.
the feeling, and you can do that. You can just reflect the feeling. Or
Okay,
you can
and
reflect
stop.
the feeling and the need if you do have a guess about the need. And you did have a guess about the need, which was a very good one, I thought. So you might try, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed because you just need support on this project. Is that it? Right? When somebody uses that language, I feel like I have to do everything. The people Jackal is speaking to are likely to feel defensive, right? Because that feels like an accusation, like you all aren't pulling your weight. But remember, in mindful listening, we don't listen to the accusation, to the judgment. We listen for the feeling and the need. And when you are able to reflect that back, it provides a powerful connection and a foundation for real communication, right? Maybe it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed because you just need support. John, you wanted to add, did you have a different idea?
No, it was exactly what Rashmi said. Overwhelmed and needing assistance.
Yeah, assistance could be changed into, sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed because you just need some assistance, right? Some help with your part of this project, right? And if you could get at that, then you could help that person to get that need met. But the listening and the empathy have to be provided first. How about one more? And I'll see if I can find another work example here. Okay, John.
Hey, Jackal.
You know what I noticed since you joined this organization? You work too much.
it seems like, Jackal, you might need more, you feel neglected and you'd like me to spend more time with you?
Yeah. It could be something like that. One tip is when you're reflecting feelings and needs, try not to implicate yourself in the person's feelings, right? So if you say you feel neglected, that might validate the jackal tendency of projecting their feelings onto you. Like, you're damn right, I feel like you're neglecting me, all right? So that's why that CNVC inventory of feelings and needs is very, very important. Any questions about these demonstrations before I share some more content?
I have a question. So when you deal with different, and this is specific to a lot of different scenarios that we face in customer success, when you deal with personalities who are narcissists or borderline narcissists, different personalities, and do you feel like when you go back and reflect these feelings back to them, they might come out and say, oh, are you trying to tell me how I feel? Is that how we're going to play? Do you feel like that can be a possible scenario? And if so, how can we overcome that?
That can and does happen, not just with people who, are malignant narcissists or what have you. It can and does happen with other kinds of folks as well. Sometimes you'll say, are you feeling this because you need this? And the person says, like, why are you talking to me like that? Is this something you learned in psychology class or something? Why do you keep asking me about my feelings? Anytime that kind of resistance arises, you want to stay with the strategy of listening for feelings and needs and stay with the strategy of providing empathy. Because if the person is expressing that, it's because they feel uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form, right? And that means that empathy is really the only thing that's going to get through and work, potentially, is empathy. So you stay with empathy. You might say, it sounds like you're feeling angry because you just really want me to speak to you like a normal person, like an equal. Is that it? Right? So you can continue to try to connect with the underlying feeling, the underlying need. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work to get through to folks like that. And I'm going to share some more about strategies that I think or things to keep in mind that I think will help you with that. My wife has a close friend who was one of her best friends in high school. And me and my wife live on the West Coast, but her best friend lives on the East Coast. So their relationship is largely through the phone. Sometimes I hear my wife talking to her friend on the phone, and my wife will reflect feelings and needs and try to connect with her friend that way. And her friend will resist. Why are you always talking about feelings? Like, what is this? Why are you doing this? But my wife will stay with empathy. And eventually her friend will come around to understanding that, this person, my friend, really just wants to understand. She wants to connect, and she appreciates it, right? Because ultimately, that's what we all want, to be heard, to be understood. So any of that kind of pushback is likely arising because the person is feeling some kind of discomfort because they have some kind of underlying unmet need, right? It just goes back to you feeling this because you just want respect,
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, just
Go ahead. Sorry, you can go first.
Thank you. Along the same lines, are there gender differences in how people respond?
No, I mean, there could be gender differences, and I don't study discourse analysis along the lines of gender. So there could be gender differences in how people are, tend to use language depending on their gender socialization. But in terms of applying the techniques, I don't know of any gender differences that have real consequences, right? Because regardless of the person's, gender orientation or how they use language, the idea is to anchor yourself in this particular language, because if you try it, you'll find that it bears fruit, right? The results are powerful and in some cases even transformative.
Thanks.
So building off of Edmund's comment, if we may have just a couple more seconds or time here, keeping from faltering with this and building a perception that, oh, this person's just trying to dig into my issues or just trying to help, like coming off as too overly helpful and disingenuine. What are some of the things that you could coach us up and keep us mindful of as we're trying to be mindful in our communication with folks without, so that there's authenticity, right? So that people understand that you are genuinely there just to try to support them.
Good question. That can actually serve as a segue into
Okay.
some of this other content. So this actually speaks to a lot, to not just your question, but other questions that were asked too. The techniques of mindful communication, in particular, we're talking about paraphrasing as observation without judgment, reflecting feelings and needs. These techniques are just the tip of the iceberg. Stephen Covey said in his work, in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, if I sense you're using some technique, I'm likely to sense duplicity. I'm likely to sense some kind of manipulation is taking place. I may wonder why you're doing it, what your motives are. And if you don't feel safe, right, you're not going to open up to the other person. So the technique, the tip of the iceberg, has to come out of what Covey referred to as the massive base of character underneath. And I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out what this could mean, right? What is the massive base of character underneath in a way that we could understand it better so that we could practice it, we could develop it. I'm drawing here again on Oren J. Sofer. He wrote a great book called A Mindful Approach to Nonviolent Communication. And for him, he says basically the underneath part of the iceberg is first leading with presence. Presence is a kind of mindfulness. It means when you're interacting with another person, you are fully present in mind, body, and spirit. You're not distracted. You're not looking at your phone. You're there, right? And that's a really nice gift that you can give to someone, right? Just your presence in a relationship or in communication. The other part of below the waterline is coming from curiosity and care. And what Sofer means by this is the reason that you're using the techniques of mindful listening should be because you're curious, because you really want to know, because you're seeking understanding, right? If your intention, your embodied intention, is seeking understanding, that is the foundation out of which the techniques arise and what makes them effective. In addition, it's about coming from care, right? Whenever somebody comes to you and they express their frustration, their pain, maybe it comes out as judgment or what have you, it's important to understand that what they're really saying is, I'm in pain and I need help, right? And we use mindful listening, we provide empathy because we care. It's an act of compassion. If that's your embodied intention as well, that's also part of the foundation out of which these techniques rise. I want to share one more thing with you, just to give you an idea of what these techniques could look like in context. This is a hypothetical conversation between a prospect and a team member, right? And I have in mind your work at GitLab. And this is just a 2-slide little script here. Somebody want to read the team member for me, and I'll read the prospect.
Sure, I'll help out.
Go ahead, David.
Oh, unless you want to do, sir, I've already talked, so.
Go for it.
All right, I'm in.
You're in, David?
I got it.
What are your acting credentials?
I've done a little off-Broadway.
Excellent. All right. You are the team member on the prospect. Here we go. One thing that drives me nuts about you tech companies, the customer service is abysmal.
Well, what I'm hearing is that you were not satisfied with the customer service you received from tech companies in the past. Is that right?
Yes, it's terrible. We pay too much to be left out to dry when the crap hits the fan.
Get it? Yeah. So you're feeling frustrated because you'd really like a company to deliver on the value by following up and addressing the issues and problems that may arise. Is that it?
Yes. I've been using our current platform, and when problems do arise, I don't even know half the time. And when I know the issues, I don't know if or how they've been addressed. What am I supposed to do then? I'm too busy to have you waste my time like that.
Get it? So you're feeling overwhelmed because your current platform doesn't really provide the transparency you need in order to be aware of issues that arise and understand how and when they've been resolved, correct?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about this issue?
No.
Have you heard of Cave Town? Oh, I'm sorry, wait. Would you like to hear about some ways our products and services can help?
Sure. Actually, I'd love to. All right, now let's back this up. Prospect says, one thing that drives me nuts, the customer service is abysmal with you tech companies. What's the first strategy that was used in this example?
Reflecting, repeating back so they acknowledge what they're feeling.
Reflecting, repeating back, right? It's a reflection of the content or paraphrasing. Now, after this statement, the team member could have gone right into the pitch about your team's customer service or your product and your customer service. You could have gone right into that. But the problem with that is if you have not first provided that person an indication that you're listening and that you understand, you're not building trust, you're not taking into account the relational dynamics of the sale, and you're not likely to win the sale based on those relational dynamics. In addition to that, by providing empathy and using these mindful listening strategies, you're going to elicit more information and you're going to understand. You're seeking first to understand, and then you have more context through which to respond when you get around to it. So the prospect says, yes, it's terrible. So your paraphrase was accurate. We pay too much to be left out to dry when the crap hits the fan. What was this next response from the team member? What technique was this?
Reflect the need.
So yeah, so there's, go ahead.
Reflecting the feeling.
So you feel frustrated.
Yeah.
And then someone said, reflect the need because you would like, right? What you would like is just the stand-in for the word need. And then it's something about the company delivering on the value in this particular way where there's follow-up and we address the issues and the problems. Good. Yes, I've been using our current platform and there's this whole story now because you were listening, providing the person empathy. Now you've elicited more information, which is where you can see the power of the technique. And then the team member says, so you're feeling overwhelmed because your current platform doesn't provide the transparency you need to be aware, et cetera, et cetera. So you've elicited more information. As you've elicited more information, you've stayed with empathy, stayed with the strategy of reflecting feelings and needs. And then even then, rather than going into the sales pitch, the team members said, hey, is there anything else you'd like to share about this particular issue? Because I'm in listening mode right now. Anything else that I need to hear before we move forward? No. And then the team member still, rather than launching right in to the pitch, says, hey, well, would you like to hear some ways our products and services can help? So now there's the foundation of trust, of understanding. You have more information to use in your response, and the prospect is in a situation now, relationally, in terms of how they feel of being ready to listen. Stephen Covey trained folks who work in sales in mindful listening, and he was such a strong believer in empathic responses that he would say that these human relational aspects of a sale really trump the technical aspects of a sale. I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I would say that you need both, right? You have to have the technical aspects, you have to have a good product, but you can't overlook the relational dynamics because people are not going to want to do business with folks who they don't trust or folks who they don't feel listen to them and understand them. Any questions about that example?
Quick question on that one, Jordan. Thanks. On that, the last part there was that, the second to last line for the team member, I'm sorry, the last line of the team member is, would you like to learn about? And it's a subtle difference with the language as opposed to let me tell you about. If you're putting it on them to still give you the approval to do so, right? As opposed to you just taking that opportunity, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but it's a subtle difference as opposed to would you, as opposed to let me do something for you. You're still asking them.
Yeah, and that could serve a function in that kind of communication because the prospect might say, actually, before you tell me about that, can I bring up this other issue? Because now I know you're listening and I can tell you're the kind of person who gets it. So I want to start just pouring out these other issues that are on my mind too. And you can continue to learn more and more to develop deeper and deeper understanding. and stronger trust. And then you ask, yeah, then when they're ready, they'll say, okay, yeah, I think now that we have this context, this foundation, now I am ready to have, to have you explain these aspects of your product or your service.
Thanks.
So I have a little bit of time left. That's good because I wanted to share the research on the benefits of mindfulness. It's part of how I sell you on these practices: sitting meditation, your own personal mindfulness practice, but also mindful communication. I work with a team here at Cal State San Bernardino to research the impact of mindfulness on teachers and students in schools. I do a lot of this work in schools. And part of the work that my team has done is we've compiled a lot of the background literature on mindfulness and its benefits. And I've considered putting some of this stuff up on slides to present it that way, but I think you get a better sense of the magnitude of this when you see it presented in this way. So check this out. This is the research findings on how mindfulness can benefit you. The psychological benefits include increased relationship quality, increased self-compassion, and when you practice self-compassion, it increases your capacity to be compassionate to others, increased happiness, life satisfaction. The citations are the studies that have found that particular finding. Increased sense of meaning in life, increased satisfaction at work, right? More satisfaction in your sense of your job, decreased stress, decreased depression, decreased anxiety, increased resilience, increased emotional regulation, self-acceptance, and a sense of well-being, increased positive body image. Those are psychological benefits. Now here's cognitive benefits: increased attention, increased memory, curiosity and exploration, problem solving, cognitive flexibility, creativity and innovation, divergent thinking, self-reflection, communication behavior, and the likelihood that you're going to reach compromise in your relationships. Schools, they see increased test scores. And here you see cortical thickening and changes in brain structures associated with learning, attention, memory, emotional intelligence, compassion, and empathy, and increased overall cognitive functioning by increasing neural integration in the brain. That means the extent to which different parts of your brain are wired together and can communicate and work together. This is really important because neuroscientists believe that mindfulness does in fact change the structure of your brain. And those structural changes in the brain are what explains in part some of these other benefits that we see in other research that's outside of the field of neuroscience. Reduced mind wandering, reduced implicit bias and stereotype threat. And now this is the last section, 3, physical benefits. We tend to think of mindfulness as this heady thing or this intellectual thing, or we think of it in a spiritual way, some of us, but look at these physical benefits that research has proven you can achieve through mindfulness. Improved immune function. There is hard science research that has found mindfulness practice can actually boost and strengthen your immune system. Enhanced epigenetic regulation of genes to prevent inflammation, better sleep, decreased levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, decreased chronic pain, improvements in cardiovascular health, including markers, cholesterol level, blood pressure, etc. Increased levels of the enzyme, a particular kind of enzyme in your body that is responsible for repairing and protecting DNA strands that slow down aging and help us to stay youthful and healthy. I don't even want to comment on that for the risk of sounding hyperbolic, but that's a pretty profound finding. And reduced hypertension. So I look at this and it gives me the impression that mindfulness can help with almost anything in our lives. And the things that mindfulness can't change, it can at least help us to accept them with grace and still live a life of meaning and purpose. It's very, very important and powerful practice. So that's it. That's all I have. If there's any other questions or feedback, we have a little bit of time for that. Otherwise, it's a wrap.
Hey, Jordan, if can you apply some of these same mindfulness techniques to yourself? And does it change? So I'm my own worst enemy, super critical of myself. I can find myself getting agitated and irrationally so, but I still can't get unagitated. So can you use some of these techniques to get unstuck?
Yes, if you're someone who has a strong self-critic, you tend to be critical of yourself, hard on yourself. Those are thought patterns. And psychologists know now that one of the most powerful tools that we have for diffusing those kinds of thought patterns is to observe them in a non-judgmental way, right? So it's just that act of saying, oh, I notice my self-critical voice right now. Because that puts distance between you and the self-critical voice rather than you getting sort of carried away by that thought pattern. So that's one way that mindfulness can work. For some of us, that doesn't mean you're going to instantly have your self-critic disappear, right? But over time, you can keep that in balance with your wise mind, right? What we call in mindfulness wise mind, your ability to be in touch with what really matters, despite that there's some of these tendencies that want to pull you in other directions in how you perceive yourself, others, in the world. Mindful communication, I talked a lot about listening, but it has a lot to do with yourself, how you understand and yourself and how you speak too. Just a quick trivial example. I was walking with my wife the other day. We do like walking meditation and we go for walks outside a lot. And I was walking with my wife and I felt I had the inclination or the impulse to complain about how I have a ton of work to do and no time to do fun things and to relax. And I just was going to start complaining. But then I thought, I actually don't want to just subject my wife to my complaining. I want to actually be more thoughtful about how I use language with my wife because I care about her, I care about myself. I'm not going to complain. Let me get in touch with what's present in me. And I realize I feel really frustrated and stressed right now because I have a need for relaxation and recreation. I have a need to do fun things. And instead of complaining, I could say to my wife, Tiana, I feel really frustrated and stressed right now because I have a need to relax and I would like to be able to do fun stuff. And I just really want you to just hear that right now, right? I don't need you to respond. I just wanted you to hear that. And that's it. So that's an example of, how mindful communication might start to arise in your own relationships, your own life.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or feedback? All right. Well, I will say that the feedback I have is I thought the session was great, Jordan. I thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Lots of great things that I'm going to incorporate more into how I interact and both in professionally and personally.
My parting words for you all are to just try these two techniques and and look at what the results are, right? Just see the results. And that should be enough to get you to move forward with this stuff because it can be transformative in your relationships.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Peace, peace. Take care, everyone.
Great job. Appreciate it, Jordan. Take care, man.
Jordan. Bye, Jackal.